Hello everyone, this is FIDE Victor Newstroyev and thank you for joining our workshop today. Today we are going to talk about paralysis in the middle game. I can also call it a positional grip when you understand what you can do in the position and your opponent struggles with a counterplay. Okay, so we are waiting for more people to join our workshop. So you can share what uh, you uh, you can share regarding your chess activities during the week. For example, Michael, how often do you play chess online? And do you see any progress? I know that you watch the recordings of our group classes. So do you find them helpful, and did they affect your performance? Because recently I noticed that one of our students, Peter B, demonstrated a significant improvement with his chess, and mainly because he improved both his understanding of chess and his tactical vision, so the ability to calculate and notice tactics. So he started winning more games and improve his performance. So if before he was about 14 and something, now he is much ahead. He's much above than 1500. So he is 15 and 50 and is going closer to 1600 on chess.com. Okay, you only play daily games. Okay, well, your rating increased by 50 points, which is great too. Well, my recommendation is, of course, to play more live games. However, at the same time, I understand that it's hard to find time during the day for live games. So it's easier to make a move in a daily game once you have such an opportunity. Okay, so people are joining. Mm-hmm. Well, tactics are much easier to find. This is a good point. Right, because when it comes to a positional play, it's very hard to come up with a move because you have to understand chess. You have to understand the position. You should be familiar with such setups, especially the pawn structure. So, well, that's why we are doing these webinars, which are mainly devoted to strategy, to positional play. Some other factors too, but also I can say that doing a lot of tactics improve your chess level anyway. So your ability to calculate gets improved with, for example, 50 puzzles per week solved. So that's why my recommendation is, even if you just see that you struggle with a positional play, keep working on tactics too. Every chess player, even a grandmaster, should be working on tactics. So you may say that, well, they are already good tactical players. I mean, if a grandmaster or another certain person is already a good tactical player, he shouldn't do chess. But no, believe me, they all do tactics. They all solve tactics, some every time, some only before the tournaments. Okay, fine. So, mhm. Okay, fine. So it's clear. Let's start. Maybe a few more students will join our workshop. Let's talk about positional grip. So first of all, I would like to illustrate the game that I recently played. It was a daily game on chess.com. So we have a club on chess.com. It's called Chesslands. And there I, from time to time, participate in daily matches against other clubs. So that was one of the matches. I mm, I won two games. So the game with black pieces was won really quickly, but this is a game that I played with white. And I think this game actually illustrates the concept of a positional grip. So knight f3 d6, it was neither with a6. So there are a lot of moves nowadays. The main line is bishop e3, e5, and so on, but everybody knows it, so that's why I decided to play something more rare, knight b3, so in advance, waiting for e5. But my opponent reacted with queen c7, and then I realized that we can easily transpose to Scheveningen pawn structure, or I can castle queenside and try to initiate the attack. Anyway, he plays e5. Queen d2, bishop e6, f3. So f3 is required to stop knight g4, as well as to support my move g4. So bishop e7, g4, b5, and well, this is where I decided to play a4. I still have an idea of castling to the queen side, if he doesn't take, if he pushes, of course. But if he takes, maybe I take with my rook and put pressure on a6. That was my plan. Also, if he takes, I take with a rook, and then I can bring the rook to c4. You say it's impossible because there is a bishop? Well, but after knight d5, I block the bishop, and rook c4, challenging the enemy queen's position, makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let me do some explanation here. E6 and a6, this is a Cancicilian. And for example, such strategy with bishop e3 almost never works against Cancicilian because of the ability of this bishop to go to b4. If black chooses e6, it transposes to Scheveningen. Sometimes from Cancicilian we also transpose to Scheveningen, but one of the best openings to play against Scheveningen is this it's called English attack. So against dragons, such a strategy that white initiate with bishop e3, queen d2, f3, and castle queenside is called Yugoslav attack. If it's initiated, if the same plan is initiated against Scheveningen or other openings or other Sicilian lines, it's called English attack. So this English attack is a good weapon against Scheveningen. But if we choose a Cancicilian setup. So, for example, queen c7, bishop e3 here fails because of bishop b4, which causes serious issues for the white's position. For example, queen d2, defending, knight f6, threatening to take. Okay, bishop d3, but d5, and if white takes, knight d5, it's attacking here and here. So typically people play f3, but f3 even loses a piece. e5, chasing the knight away, and d4, winning a piece. So they have to sacrifice a knight for 2 pawns. That's why against Cancicilian, people don't play early bishop e3. Instead, they play bishop e2, bishop d3. What else? Actually, these are two main moves. Or sometimes they don't play a knight c3, but first continue with c4.
I guess you might be answering it, but I just mean more generally, like in some variations of the Sicilian, you push e6, and in some variations, you push d6, you know? And
Well, these are conceptually different setups. So e6 is played because we want to control the d5. If so, we delay d6 and try to control e5, which is also a key square, with our pieces, such as a queen and a knight. Well, in Scheveningen, d6 is played earlier. And well, it's still a strong opening, but what I don't like about this opening is that it allows bishop e3. So, and then this kingside attack, which is quite dangerous. So, well, that's why I prefer to start with e6 to have this bishop b4 move. But this is still a solid opening. There are tons of games played by grandmasters. In many of them, black won. However, well, from my point of view, I see that white probably gets more chances to succeed. Their attack is stronger. Black seems to be a little passive. So this is what I don't play. But if you like, you can play so. So For example, you can play neither, you can play dragon here, or even accelerated dragon. No, with not with d6. So just dragon. If you already play d6, it can be just dragon. So bishop a3, bishop g7, f3. So if you know this line and you want to play it, it's fine. So even if they castle queenside, black has d5 and simplify the position. Well, most likely here the game ends in a draw if both players are strong enough. Well, I, in this position, continue with g4, which stops d5, because now I can chase the knight away and then just win the pawn. Okay, fine. Let's go back to our game. It was neither. G4 was played, b5, and I played a4 to undermine it. So he definitely plays b4, the knight goes to d5. Taking with a knight means that this bishop can hardly find a good spot. So that's why he takes with a bishop. Well, having the pawn on d5, on the one hand, is a weakness. So d5 is a weakness on the one hand. On the other hand, d5 prevents the enemy piece's activity because white chooses this setup, this and this, in order to push d5. If only he can do it successfully, then the position is equal. So, but if I stop it, they should play accurately to have a counterplay for that. Now I have the pawn there. If I can save it, then it seems that it would be very hard for black to come up with a counterplay. Castle, castle queenside. So by castling queenside, I do not make my king weak. I protect c2. a4 is not a problem because I can push a5 and then have bishop b6, for example. If they play a5, then I play bishop b5 and they can hardly attack a4. So knight bd7, this knight goes to b6 to attack d5. That's the reason why I played a5. So this is where a positional grip starts. So my opponent doesn't really have any active strategies here. So, well, he should attack on the king side, but how can he do this? A pawn exchange is unlikely to happen. So only if I play c3, which I don't want to. If he plays a5, then my bishop comes there. So he plays this move, and then I play e5. The pawn is protected. Even if he somehow attacks it, it's not enough. b4 is hanging. However, I'm not going to capture it right away because I may open the b file for his future attack. So that's why I have to prepare and do something else. With a6, at least I don't allow him to play knight b6. And the other option, which is knight c5 in this position, fails. Because if so, I have this. How does he play? Well, he adds pressure. Looks quite logical. King b1. Knight c5 still fails because of the same reason. Bishop f8. Now knight c5 works. So what would you suggest for white in this position to keep this positional grip and not allow black to get any counterplay? Okay, so waiting for your suggestions. Yes, thanks, John. Brian suggests bishop d3, but Brian, doesn't it blunder the pawn? Or probably you have this idea in mind. But then c2 is lost. So bishop d3 blunders there. So bishop h7 here. Well, this move I think fails because they can capture on a3. You take there, they capture there. So if rook takes, I take here. If the bishop retreats, for example, here, then what? Knight a3, knight that doesn't work. So I don't want to play without. It's fine. I can just sacrifice on c3 or b2. I'm fine with it. So I mean, black is fine with it. So That's why knight d5 is a serious problem. And in case of a discovered attack, queen takes d5, queen c2 is a problem. Well, white doesn't lose the game, but they lose a very important pawn on c2. Then king g1, for example. Okay, fine. So no, bishop d3 doesn't make sense. The bishop is not doing much there, and it also overlaps the queen activity. If you want to protect this pawn, one of the common ideas is to do so, rook h4, rook h2. But I like John's suggestion to play g4, g5, I mean, chase the knight away and continue with bishop h3. Why so? Because with bishop h3, we make a pin, which makes knight c5 impossible. Then we take on c8 and win material. We also threaten bishop g4, which traps the knight on h5. And if they continue with g6, then taking this knight exposes the king's position. d5 is no longer hanging. So
How about pushing h4 before you push
no,
g5?
if I push h4, then I think he can already play this move. This is one option. The other option is, well, I wonder if this makes any sense. Probably not, because then I take. No, it doesn't. So he does knight c5, if so. And with knight c5, he wants to exchange my knight. So probably it's still not a big issue. What do I have to do? If I want to take, which piece should I take it? This is unlikely to be a good move because of his activity through the b file. So I should take on c5, I think. Which piece weighs? What do you think? Yeah, and then I can blockade. With a knight, Johnny, why with a knight? Then I might lose a5. So I actually thought it's quite suspicious. Well, d6, yes, but then I let him take. And I thought that I'd better not allow him to have any counterplay with such an activity. If so, I would capture, and instead of pushing, well, d6 is playable. I think I would push it, and then I would continue with bishop c4 move. The only problem is to be able to protect it, because if he does this move, I can get into trouble. So how can I continue here? Maybe G, no, then knight d6. Okay. Okay, so it doesn't look so good. I think bishop c4 is a mistake here, or even... Oh yeah, if he does queen d7, I have this bishop h3 idea, which allows me to win material. So the queen has to go somewhere else, maybe here, and then bishop c4 makes sense, but this is hanging. Okay, this is not hanging now. So g5, knight d7, and this. Okay, fine. If he takes, it's bishop d5. Or just rook f1 and I take on f7. Both options are fine. Knight c5, this, d6, queen a5, g5 in this position. Okay, how does it work? So bishop h3 then. Well, this looks a little dangerous. Okay, so I definitely consider it playing h4 in this position, h5, and then g5. So because if only I had these two tempi, I would definitely play it. Because if so, then I chase the knight back to e8, which is quite favorable for me. But I just didn't think that I have enough time to do h4, h5. That's why I played g5 myself. Knight h5 and bishop h3, exactly like John suggested. Why so? Well, first of all, what is this knight doing? And this knight is pinned, so there is no counterplay with knight c5. He doesn't exchange my knight, and that's why he doesn't capture the pawn on a5. That's why he is likely to struggle with his next move. For example, if he plays g6, I think I would continue with something like that, threatening to take. He would escape, and then this, having a strong attack there. So if he somehow wants to bring this knight to c5, I'll definitely capture the rook. So first he has to move the rook, but if he moves the rook, he is no longer threatening c2. So h5, knight c5, h takes. Well, if he takes with the h, queen h2, and I win the game, I think. So f takes, but then I can capture on c5. This time I don't think there is a big difference which piece with, because after queen h2, taking on a5 is quite slow. So I'm about to play bishop e6 and then checkmate on h7 in case of queen e5. Well, it's a winning position, obviously. So you see, yes, I could play what Johnny suggested, for example. I could play g5. So yeah, I could play h4 and I could let him to play knight c5, but I wanted to prevent any counterplay. If so, he will struggle with a check, he will struggle with his plan, and he'll try to do his best and obtain some initiative, and probably, or I would say most likely, makes a mistake. So when a player sees that it's hard for him to come up with a plan, it's hard for him to uh, create any activity of his pieces, most likely he starts making mistakes. So g5. Knight h5, bishop h3. He goes there and sacrifices a pawn. How does he sacrifice a pawn? I can take there, then I take on d7 and take on a4. And now I have a bishop, a knight versus bishop. My knight is better, so the enemy bishop can go there, but my knight goes to c6, which is quite common in neither of positions. So g6, logical, but knight d4, he does this move. I expected this, and after knight c6, well, his bishop is attacking the pawn on b2, but no one else can support this pawn. So any of his activity should be connected to this, should refer to the sacrifice of the exchange on c6, then he probably loses this pawn. So bishop e5 is just a temporary threat. When I move my queen away, I can undermine this bishop with my pawn, so it's completely fine. That's why he sees this problem with knight c6 and he plays this move first. Queen d2, moving the queen back, bishop g7, and finally knight c6 was played. So what did we get? The knight on c6 is still restricting enemy pieces' activity. There is a rook on c4 and I cannot trap it, but I can try to exchange it. This move. So with such a knight on c6, I most likely win the game. I'm already pawn up. So exchanging pieces favors me. So if I can get rid of the major pieces, I'm likely to increase my advantage by capturing the pawn on a6, or maybe the pawn on b4 too. And with several extra pawns, I'm completely winning. So rook h1, we exchanged. And now he plays this move to cover the back rank to protect d6 also. Queen d3, threatening there. Black has queen f5. So no, black doesn't have queen f5. Check and knight e7. So if he wanted to play queen e5, he couldn't do it at all, because if queen f5 here is a blunder. So king f8 probably, in order to play queen f5. Well, then I first can start with queen d3 move. Rook c5 and then rook e1, threatening to invade. So that's why rook e8 was played. The rooks were exchanged. He plays this move, queen d3. He moves there. I can take on a6, and this pawn becomes dangerous. But if I do this, which is probably a good move, then rook d5. I can take the other pawn. He takes there. I have a pass pawn. I open the position, but at the same time, I allow my opponent to have some counterplay. Maybe he attacks b2. Maybe he attacks c2 while my pawn still requires 3 tempi to get promoted. That's why it's better to not capture on a6. And if I want to restrict the enemy piece's activity, what do you think I should do? So please suggest the moves which, in your opinion, um, allow white to have some activity, but at the same time prevent black from any counterplay. What would you do here? Let's come up with a plan. So I definitely shouldn't make any simplification. Well, it would be great if I could exchange queens and rooks, but how? Only if occasionally such an exchange is offered. Then I'm definitely winning because of the position of my knight. So what do you think how I should play in order to activate my pieces, or would just improve my position, but not let him improve his position? Okay, then suggest rook e4 and rook c4, which in my opinion seems a little slow. Why it seems a little slow? I think he can just continue with rook e4, queen f5. And now rook c4 means I lose a pawn on d5. Rook a4 and rook b4, yes, but again, it's this. So knight e7 is not playable. Bringing the rook there means queen d3, pawn takes d3. Well, rook d5 is a blunder because of knight e7, but what if he starts with this move first? Okay, then probably in order to defend here, I can play this move. But then he takes there. And I'm not sure if I can win, because even if I try to take the pawn on a6, this move. So the knight is hanging, he takes, and then he takes there. So am I winning? I doubt. So rook e4 doesn't look good because I let him playing queen f5. What else I can do? What's wrong with queen a6? Well, with queen a6, I provide my opponent with a counterplay. He takes on d5, g5 is hanging also. So this knight is no longer supported by the pawn. So how do I play? If this, he takes on g5. Well, queen c6, queen h3, let's say. I promote, he takes there, promote further. Maybe it's actually winning. Okay, maybe he does a rook a5 here. Queen b6 and then a7. Well, looks like a winning position, actually. Maybe this is where he can do better. For example, I play queen c6, he can take on c6, knight takes c6, and he can play this move, threatening both. 97 in which position? This position, 97. Oh, I didn't see these tactics. Yeah, there is tactics, okay. Okay, then queen a6 works, actually. I played h4. Why h4? Well, I protect the pawn on g5. It allows me to play h5 in future and play on the king side. And his only activity is this move. However, after queen e4, I defend everything. Yeah, if I play queen e4, he can still move the queen away, and now queen e8 doesn't look so good. So queen h2,
Well,
threatening.
how about
What?
the c4? c4, b takes, b4 in the previous move.
So don't I expose the king?
You do expose the king, but now next move you can push c4.
Yes, I
And
can, but it's his turn. So what if he does this move, let's say?
just move it out of the way. King to c2.
Oh, c2. Mm, okay, now c4, he can just retreats back to b7. And with his bishop g7, b2 becomes a problem. So, well,
Okay.
well, if you see that there is a concrete win, for example, if you play queen a6 and after this move you see knight a7, you may play so. Otherwise, your task is to make such moves which do not allow your opponent to progress or to get any improvement. Maybe they improve your position just a little, but at least they don't improve the position of your opponent. So he doesn't have any options. Okay, queen e8, it looks good with the knight coming in. So queen here, queen there, queen e8. No, when? Okay. Oops, h4, queen h3, queen e4, queen h2, and then knight e7 looks good. Knight e7 he has to take. If he plays king move, queen d4. So he has to take, I take. But then it's queen c2. And a quick checkmate. So my queen is tied down, and this is where I made a mistake. I should definitely play rook a2 here, and then continue with rook d2, trying to defend the pawn here and there, and then continue with some activity. Maybe I can then capture on b4 with my queen, because this queen no longer is required to protect the pawn on c2 if I already protected with my rook. Or maybe just rook d1 here works. So this is what I should do. I played rook a2, let him come closer, and then after queen f2, finally I played rook d1. Everything is protected. And he doesn't know what to do. He plays queen g2 back. So while the queen is on e4, this piece's activity is not enough. So b3 works only when there is a bishop on g7. So this is the only thing I just have to keep in mind. What do you think I should do in this position? So I kept everything defended, but tried to improve my position in order to play for a win. Take the b pawn. Well, looks logical, but if I do so, I lose my pawn on a5. So rook e1, but my rook was already on e1. Why defend with the rook on d1 instead of rook c1? So rook c1 is a very passive move. My rook is only doing one task here. So rook d1 defends there, and the queen is defending c2. So the rook can also successfully play through the d file. Maybe I am hoping to play this move, maybe something else, but at least I can move my queen. Well, at the same time, I shouldn't leave this pawn hanging. The queen on f6, but then I lose on c2. Well, what I did play, I played this, okay, rook d1, queen g2, I played this move. What does this move do? I'm hoping to regroup my pieces. So a5 isn't hanging. If he takes so, then after knight d7, he doesn't have any moves, because with queen e8, I win a bishop. How can he save it? Rook c5, at least I win exchange and then promote my past pawn. So king g7, queen e8. The bishop is trapped. And there is no even some counter attack because I capture with a tempo, and this is also checkmate. So that's why with knight b8, I do not hang the pawn on a5. Queen h3. So he doesn't want me to initiate this. And I think actually that was the best move. Maybe it was better to create some counterplay and sacrifice another pawn like that. And then, but then still this fails. So he attacks, but I can do this, this, and in this position, if I play so, he does this move. So I'd better avoid it. But I think my king is relatively safe on a2. So I can, for example, exchange rooks. And there is no perpetual check because I move my king to a2. Let's say this, 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 this. So maybe he does. Wait. The queen cannot deliver checks on the e file. There is my queen on e8. So queen f2. I go there. It goes there. I can hide my king on a2. And then still do this and still win the bishop. So queen h3 was played to stop knight d7. But now knight e6 works, and I exchange one pawn for two. And still can get my knight to c6 back. Queen c8, c3 as a prophylaxis. He goes there to threaten rook a1. So that's why king c2. Rook a1 now doesn't make much sense. He plays rook c5. Knight c6 paralyzes this position, his position. So I was expecting him to play queen a2 move, for which I prepared. I don't remember exactly what I prepared. So queen a2, I think, this move with this threat. So, for example, he does so. I can continue with rook b4 to stop it. And if he takes on d5, he loses. With this move, I'm threatening to play knight e7. But at least I exchanged, and now I can promote the b pawn. So rook b5, queen c4 prevents any invasion. Rook c5 back, okay, queen e4. Rook b5, queen d4. So doing bishop g7 here fails. If he does so, it's queen a7, and I offer an exchange of the queens. And if so, I still offer an exchange of the queens. He goes back, but I can capture on d6 and then threaten with this, threaten with something like that, as well as queen d8 to exchange the queens. For example, if he does queen e2, which looks quite aggressive, it's just queen a3 can be played. But I think I'm winning if I do so. If he goes there, it's queen d8. If he goes there, it's queen d8 in one move. Checkmate in one. Okay. So queen b7, he adds pressure, b4, and there is no pressure. Queen d7, c4, the rook has to move. And I offer a trade, because without queens on the board, there is nothing to discuss. Queen e8, I offer a trade once again, and what now? He has to go back to a8. If he goes to d7, what do you think I should do? Well, rook a1, maybe. I thought maybe rook a1 or just king b3 to cement my position, to defend the pawns. Maybe I want to move my knight later in the game, and then either rook a1 or rook e1 to invade the enemy territory. But he plays queen e8. I don't think this is a good move, but let's say king b3, so I prevent invasion. He does rook b6. And if I don't want him to initiate any counterplay, what do you think I should do? Queen b1. What's the point of queen b1? Yeah, okay, so queen b1 moves my queen to a bit of a passive position. So I play b5, like John suggested. Why and Zamfir? Yes, that's right. Because now he can never double with his pieces on the A file. How? So attacked, everything is under my attack. So knight attacks here, pawn attacks there, the king attacks 3 squares, and the rook covers A1. So there is no chance for him to obtain any counterplay through the A file because I control all the squares. He can only keep his queen on E8, but he cannot move the second piece to the A file. So, well, the moves you suggest can be good too, but if we are talking about how to make a positional grip, how to paralyze enemy forces in the middle game, then we'd better choose such moves that do not allow us to win immediately, but slightly improve our position. However, at the same time, do not allow our opponent to create any significant activity. So if you use such a principle, you are unlikely to lose the game. Why? So, for example, let's say maybe not here, and maybe even here, you choose to play this move. Maybe it works too, d6. So the concept is that he cannot take there. So if he takes there, you can exchange, and now he cannot stop the pawn. Maybe you still win. But are you sure that you calculated this line properly? I doubt, because there are tons of moments where you can make a mistake. For example, what if he takes with a rook? You can still play this move, but then it's c4 with a check, and now the queen invades your territory. Maybe king b2, but c3, or even bishop g7. So, and then queen e1 or queen a2. So well, if you take such a responsible decision to play c5, you should make sure that you calculated the line properly. There are no mistakes. However, that's why, because it's a complex line and you have to consider how exactly to play, you should make sure that you see all logical enemy moves, you're calculated and you are satisfied with the positions that arise after you play such a move. And it's very easy to make a mistake. That's why, in order to not make a mistake, you better choose something not so strong, but which eliminates any activity of the enemy pieces. So that's why b5, rook b7. Okay, so what can I do? Can keep improving my pieces. So, and if only I exchange the queens here, I can bring my king successfully and promote the b pawn. That's why rook e1. So queen c8, he wants to activate his queen here or there. Should I calculate it? Well, probably I can, but I don't want his queen to go to h3 and capture my pawn on f3. Delivery check. Why? Because if so, I have to calculate the line further and check that there is no perpetual check. Why should I do so? Why should I do this extra work if instead I can play a move which stops this activity, but at the same time allows me to continue with my plan? So, of course, I played queen g4. If he exchanges, there is nothing to discuss. I just invade his territory with my king and promote, while his pieces are useless. So queen g4, he doesn't exchange the queens, he plays queen e8 back. Okay, so if I play queen e4, he goes back. What should I do? Right, so how can I improve my position? I can play h5. There, my king is on the other side of the board, and I can definitely advance pawns, and this is how I won't weaken my king, but I'm likely to weaken the enemy king or restrict the enemy bishop. So I thought that he takes, after which I was about to play these moves to threaten h7. But he played bishop g7. Here I was seriously thinking about h6, which is another positional grip. Because, for example, if he does bishop h8, I can continue with queen e4 and then exchange the queens. Something like that doesn't help. Here I can take or I can push f4. Both lines are completely fine. So that would force him to go there. And after that, I can continue with the f pawn, for example. Maybe queen e4 or queen d4 and then continue with the f pawn. But I played queen e4 back. Why? Because I'm threatening to exchange queens. So if he does so, then I will decide what I do. Probably I would still continue with queen e8 and exchange. Oh, if he does so, I would take there. He would take, and then I would offer a queen exchange, which he cannot avoid because he cannot move his queen to any square through the a file. And I just exchange the queens and then bring my king and win the game. So g takes h5. This is what he plays. What I should do? Still exchange the queens? Yes. Yes, it might work. And that was the move that I discussed. I mean, I calculated. So if I do so, I'm sure I'm winning. But then I have to think about how far this pawn may move to. I'm sure I can stop it even at the very last moment. But, well, maybe what if the pawn becomes dangerous? Is there a way for me to not let this pawn to get promoted? Because ideally, if I play queen e8, maybe knight d4. Well, I was thinking about this and rook h4. So this, but he goes there and stops and defends the pawn. So that's why I have to find something else. Maybe knight d4, knight f5. I have to calculate it. But can I play anything else in this position? Because with the queens on the board, this pawn doesn't look dangerous. Yeah, rook h1 definitely makes sense. What did I play? f4. How? Because knight e7, knight f5, rerouting the knight. Well, maybe two. But, well, not so sure what the knight does there. It attacks d6. This is the only threat, and I allow him to double if I reroute my knight. So I played f4. Why? Because I'm still threatening to play queen e8. Why? Well, let me play just a random move. Queen e8. This time I take. He does so, and I continue with f5 move, which eliminates king g6. And now capturing this pawn is a very easy task. And if he tries something like that, then I think I can do knight e6, threatening with this, or just continue with g6. So I played f4. Maybe I wanted to continue with f5 and f6 if he doesn't do anything. That actually blocks his other pieces from the defense of the king, and rook h1, rook h5, and queen h7 leads to checkmate. So he played bishop f8 back. Now, okay, rook h1, and I capture this pawn. f5 was also a possibility. He does queen c8, but queen c8 doesn't allow him to progress, because if I take on h5, I'm threatening a mate. So there is no invasion with queen g4 at least. What he can do is f6 or f5. Both fail. Why? Because the king gets exposed, of course, and passant. Here, he did rook f7. Well, what else could he do, actually? Well, rook f7 was one of the options. What I thought? Well, I thought that this is a blunder. A king move. A king move means I can play knight e7 and break the connection between rook and h7 pawn, and I can capture it. So actually, that's the reason why he plays rook f7. Now what? So it's a completely winning position. And probably to Yeah, to defeat my opponent right away, I can play queen e6. How does it work? So I'm threatening with this move. I'm threatening with this move too. Well, if he takes, I take. He takes there, but e7, and I take his bishop. And then here I go there, protecting and promoting. Yeah, queen e6 would be a good move, and this is what I wanted to play. But then I figure out that there is another line which wins the game too. It's a little more complicated, but I was able to calculate it. Okay, 97. There is also a line of 97. So if the king moves, it's knight g6 or what?
Knight c8.
Oh, of course, knight c8. Yeah. So bishop takes, pawn takes, queen e8. I calculated, but I didn't realize that there is queen b2. So wait a sec. How should I play here? I should deliver a check with my rook. He blocks. Queen e6 check, he goes there, and queen f6. Yeah, that was a very nice line. Yes, I could play like that. I played instead queen g2. It wins too. Queen g2, he has to move the king. There is only one move. And with queen g6, I'm threatening to take f7. So how can he defend f7? I was expecting this. But if he does this, then with knight a7, I break the connection between these two pieces, as well as threaten checkmate on g8 with my queen. So, for example, he takes, I take f7, and he loses or is checkmated. I think he is checkmated regardless of what he plays. So, okay, so queen d7, knight e7. He would sacrifice a rook. I would capture. Then he captures with a queen. This is a likely scenario. But this is a losing position for him. So what can I do, for example? What's the simplest way to win? Well, I can do queen g3 to prevent any invasion, for example. But there is another simple win. Well, queen e6 is a possibility. Can you notice a simple win in this position? b6, queen e3, kind of a counterplay. So b6 is unlikely to work. He does this. Well, queen e6 is true. What else? Thanks, John. It's trade on h7. And playing b6 because this bishop is too far. So this is what I expected and I calculated it. However, he played this move and this is how he loses after rook h7 just. So if he takes, he resigned. But if he takes, he loses a queen. And then the game. So what's the concept of a positional grip or how to create a paralysis of the enemy position and of the enemy pieces? Well, you guys actually suggested reasonable moves, but the moves you suggested required a lot of calculations. A lot of calculations, and they take a lot of responsibility. If you cannot calculate the line properly, but you think that your position is better and you want to exploit this advantage, probably you'd better play something else, something more simple, which still keeps your advantage but doesn't allow your opponent to progress. So in the lines you suggest, you are trying to attack and let him attack. This is what I actually want you to avoid, because if you provide your opponent with a counterplay, you may blunder something. So if you see that your domination is strong enough and you at least can prevent enemy pieces activity and prevent any danger that they can create to your king, just focus on it. prevent the enemy piece's activity. And later, once you see that the enemy pieces are stuck, continue with your plan, even if such a plan wouldn't be so promising like it is at the moment. So don't only think what you should do in the position. Think about what your opponent can do. And instead of trying to initiate your plan right away, as well as provide your opponent with a counterplay, prevent his counterplay, and do your plan later. So this is the concept. Okay, fine. So let me show you the second example. This time it's not my game. It was Friedrich Saemisch playing against Aaron Nimzowitsch. Well, let's take a look at this position. Well, it's complicated for both, and it's hard to play for a plan, come up with a plan and suggest moves for both players. So probably something like that makes a lot of sense, but what I don't like about this position is that the knight goes to c5, but it's actually white to move. What do you think white should do? Their bishop is bad. It's not doing much on g2. The bishop on c6 is bad. This is what you probably think. But the bishop on c6 can be improved. Once you do so, you can set your bishop on b5. So this is how this bishop on b5 becomes better than the bishop on g2.
What
The
what
dark
is the
square.
what is the general theory of limiting counterplay called? I mean, actually, I think Nimzowitsch in my system talked a lot about this, right? But like one word would be like constriction or something like that. But, you call it paralysis here.
Well,
What's the general?
constraining, it's something like that. So it's well, at our group lessons, well, prophylaxis is a very basic word. It's either restrained or constrained. At our group classes, we had a lesson which was devoted to how to prevent enemy threats and how to successfully defend against them. So yeah, constrain, right? Thanks, Peter. Yeah, I think, well, of course, Nimzowitsch wrote his book in German, but I think it was translated to English as constrain. I read this book, not the entire book. I mean, I'm talking about Nimzowitsch, my system. I read only chapters that were most interesting for me. So not all of them, but maybe about 40 or 50% of all the content in that book. And some of his ideas were also explained on my webinar. So fine. What should white do in this position to have chances to get a position where they can play for a win? Their bishop is bad, right? But if they somehow open it, if they open the position as well as their bishops, they may work. So you think e4. How does e4 work? Because in my opinion, it's just a pawn blunder at the moment. And if you decide to bring a rook to defend, I'm likely to continue with b4. No, b4, knight e4. Okay, how am I likely to continue here? Well, I still like before, but let me play bishop d5 first. The queen goes to c2, and then I play rook c8. Okay, maybe the queen went to wrong square. Queen d1. Still rook here. If you take, I improve my pawn structure, and I am a pawn up. So probably you should take on e4. If so, I can capture there. So bishop takes, I think. Capture there. Do I have to? Let's decide. Maybe I just capture there first. And if b3, can I get my bishop escaped? Oh, definitely I have this. Queen d4 earlier. Yeah, actually, queen d4 earlier makes a lot of sense too. Good point. So that's why e4, no. But you guys probably noticed that this bishop is hanging on c6. Once the knight moves, it's a discovered attack. But where does the knight moves? d5? No. I mean, neither b5 nor d5. Is there any aggressive move? Knight a4, threatening c5, but after b takes a4, there is queen hanging. So, no, it's not a possibility. So how can white get a counterplay here? With knight a4, yes. How does knight a4 works? Well, pawn takes, rook takes. It still blunders the pawn on d4, but after rook d1, the queen experiences issues to where to retreat. So queen a4 seems to be the only move. Well, there is also queen b4 move. So queen b4, bishop b4, and then just bishop g5, winning the pawn back, threatening to take here and then on e4. So actually, maybe because of that, queen e4 is more attractive, but even there, rook comes to c4 and one of the pawns is lost anyway. So this endgame is quite promising for white. There is no guarantee that they win, but at least their pieces are active. The position becomes more open. They win the pawn back, and once the bishops are open, they definitely have a promising position. So 94. White didn't play so. He didn't know what to do and decided just to improve his position with h3 move. But queen d7. And now 94 never works because this bishop is protected. If he, well, and b4 becomes a threat because then there is no knight a4. They played king h2. Well, they didn't know what to do. That's why they decided to make this move as a prophylaxis. But look at this position and tell me what white should actually do to not let black to improve their position step by step. Does white have any active plan here? So rook d1 and f3, e4. So which rook? This rook to d1 and then, okay, but then I play b4. And actually there is bishop a4. There is a plan. So here, for example, you may say that this knight is not where it should be. It would be better located here or here. You cannot bring the knight to c5, but you can bring the knight to e5. So knight b1 is actually the best move. b4, knight d2, rook c8, knight f3, bishop b5, knight e5, queen moves. And this is still playable. I'm not sure that the e4 will be played in this game, but at least white improved their position. They can exchange the rooks and simplify it, so they are not losing. This bishop is still bad, but after the exchange of the rooks, it can come to f1, and maybe these bishops will be exchanged. So the position simplifies, and white doesn't lose. Okay, so actually I prepared the game of Mark Dvoretsky for today, but I don't think we have time to look at this game. So probably there will be the second webinar devoted to this topic sometime later because I have so much material left. Well, this game is likely to be over soon because of King H2 move. So white is trying to make some moves in order to do some prophylaxis. And he doesn't really understand that with these moves, he only allows black to come up with his plan. So knight h5, bishop retreats, and f5. So the position of the king was a little compromised, and the 4 is coming. In order to stop it, they play queen d1. So now if f4 is played, they can continue with e4 and open the position for their bishops. So how does it work? Take, take. If rook takes, queen takes. D takes d4. Knight takes d4. And if queen d4, there is just a bishop hanging here on c6. So he has to take first, but then there is a rook hanging. That's why the d4 pawn is not under attack. Okay, fine. Well, let me go back. So yeah, queen d4, rook c6. This is protected. If these are exchanged and then queen d4 is played, then bishop e8, queen d2, but queen g, no, not queen g2, king. Just bishop g2. And well, white is winning. So f4 doesn't work. But b4, the knight goes to b1. So we restricted the knight. Bishop b5, improving the bishop. It's no longer hanging. It's pinning the e pawn. Rook g1 to unpin such a pawn. Bishop d6, improving the bishop and preparing an attack on the king side. So what do you think white should do in this position in order to defend? Oh, by the way, let me comment this ChatGPT note that Peter demonstrated us. So, well, there are a lot of words written, but what I want you to remember is that every time your opponent makes a move, you should ask yourself what my opponent wants, and then decide. If you have to defend your position immediately, if there is a specific threat that requires prophylaxis or defense, or you can ignore it and come up with and continue with your own plan, or maybe adjust your plan a little and still continue with it. Okay, so good point. Yes, e4, this is what they played. But actually, they'd better, well, this move, I think, fails. The knight goes to f6 and comes to e4, so e3. This rook c1, rook c1, rook c8, knight goes there, and then bishop d3. So sooner or later, we will occupy it, as well as invade the second rank. This is where black definitely is ahead. Bishop f3 was the best move. Knight f6. Bishop f4, exchanging the bishops, knight e4, bishop d6, queen takes, and with king g2, they can hold their position and take on e4 when they want. So this knight doesn't go anywhere, and there is always a chance to take it if only white considers this knight to become dangerous. e4 was played with a counterattack. Seems like a very nice tactical strike which allows to win a piece. But actually, this is a losing move. How this move becomes a losing move? This is what Aaron Nimzowitsch well, calculated and realized. Actually, I think that he calculated rook f2 until this moment. Then, well, the queen is likely to move to protect on d2, so bishop d3 is coming to take here and to attack there. The knight was sacrificed for 2 pawns, so something like bishop a3 or bishop a1 at least allows us to take this 3rd pawn and attack the 4th pawn, so there will be a significant compensation. Queen g5 was played in order to protect there. Rook f8, and I think that he calculated until this moment. But then he realized that there is no way for white to progress, and anything he can do leads to material losses. And these material losses are more significant and do not are more than a compensation for the knight. So what do you think? A3 now. Yeah, A3 is definitely a good move, but it fails too. So A3, I can continue with rook to F5. If you play, where do you play, by the way? Well, I don't think that Queen H4 is a good move. But let's say you play Queen E3. If so, after this move, you have to move your queen to B3, right? But then I can play Bishop C4, right? This is one option. I think I have a better move. Yeah, I have a better move. I can play this. The queen goes to, let's say, here. And then Bishop G3. Or actually, Rook G3. Rook G3 works. It was something similar happened in the game. King H1, another tempo loss, after which was Rook F5 played. Well, even H6 was fine. H6, Queen E3, Rook E2, Queen B3, and Rook F2, threatening to play Bishop A4 and trap the Queen. Well, you of course may say that it's time to Bishop A4 right away, and I actually agree with you. Yes, Bishop A4 is probably stronger, you trap the Queen. So, but this move was played. So Queen goes to E3. Bishop D3, even not Rook E2. Rook E2 was good, but Bishop D3 is good too. How to play? Well, they played Rook C1. Now Rook E2 is not possible. H6. So you see, White has extra material, but his pieces are completely paralyzed. What they can do. So the only logical plan that they have is A3. But even just A5, and they struggle with what to continue. But already after playing A3, they lose the game. Can you tell me with which tactical strike they lose the game? So Rook F3 traps the queen. That's right. This, and the queen is trapped. While we can still continue the attack and bring the queen into the attack. Fine. So this is how the game ended. So, but look at this position again. It's extra piece, but any move leads to a loss. So this move maybe, well, still Rook F3 works. Even Bishop B1 works. Maybe it was better to keep the queen there on H4. Then Bishop E7. Queen here, then Bishop E2. And the queen is still trapped. So let's look at this position once again. What Black was trying to do. So once H3 was played, Black realized that this is the only counterplay and it can be restricted if the queen is protecting this bishop, for example. Then White didn't come up with this move, with this plan. Well, maybe they considered it to be too slow. Maybe they just didn't want to bring their knight back. So they played king move, thinking that, okay, so let me keep my king there. Maybe I can use the f pawn in future, play e4 and so on. But after knight h5 and f5, e4 will be never played and f4 becomes a threat. So queen d1 bringing the queen. Still, knight b1 would be a better move in this position. So f4, then bishop f3. So take. Well, this fails because this is hanging. So knight f6, and this would be still playable. But they played queen d1, hoping that they can win a knight. However, instead, they're absolutely trapped. So they're about to play e4. If they play e4 right now, we take on f1. So that's why they move the rook first. We improved our pieces. And then after this simple sacrifice, they are in the trouble. It's completely losing. White being a piece up is completely losing. Why? Because he didn't understand what Black is going to do and tried just to consolidate his pieces. Black instead thought that there are some aggressive plans that white can initiate, for example, with a knight transfer to e5, and with his moves he prevented white actions and initiated his activity on the king side, finally provoking white to make a significant mistake with a4, after which the white's position was completely paralyzed. Okay, we have one more game to analyze, but before doing this game analysis, I want to remind that if you want to support my workshops and my other activity, you can always donate using this button, using this link and this button. It's quite simple. However, you have to have PayPal or you have to create a PayPal account. You click this button, donate, then you see this pop-up window where you have to enter details. Like here you enter which amount you want to donate. For example, can be any amount actually. Then a PayPal button appears and then you click on it. It redirects you to your PayPal account. You enter it and send money directly to my account. I would appreciate it, and it helps me to prepare material for the webinars. Okay, thanks. Let's continue. So let's take a look at this game. Nigel Short was playing against Jan Timman, and it seems that this pawn on e5 seriously constrains the black piece's activity. However, at the moment it is hanging. What white should do? Definitely defend it with rook e1. There is no better move. Black also experiences issues with this bishop. So how can they improve it? Well, bishop f5, probably. But then knight d2, knight f3. This bishop can be chased away. So playing this move makes sense. However, they play d6. Why? Because if, for example, they play bishop d7, you can play c3, chasing the queen away from the center, and continue with e6, which totally changes the character of the position. So this bishop is still restricted and not doing much. There is a check. So rook f7, this has to be protected. So either bishop a3, rook f1, and black considered this exchange of the pawn on a6 unfavorable for them because it makes the e7 pawn isolated. But actually, it was the best way that they could do. Bishop d7, trying to improve the bishop, and white should play e6, c3 and e6, and get a small advantage. However, black played e6 himself to stop white from playing e6. Knight d2, knight goes there, so knight f3, knight d5, knight f3. White keeps this pawn, which constrains the black piece's activity. Queen goes to c5. Now, in this position, I would start with this move to prevent the enemy activity, like queen b4, knight b4, as well as I would control d4 and could set my knight on d4. But they played queen e4 move. I don't know why exactly. Maybe they wanted to do this. So black wants to offer an exchange of the queens. They think that they are likely to get some relief if so. What's your opinion? Should white capture on b4 or not? So if not, then what would you suggest? So bishop takes d5. Wait a sec. Bishop takes d5. E takes d5. You win a pawn on d5. But after bishop e6, they have some activity with their bishops. Actually, it's playable. I think so. You can play queen. No, the queen should be on e2 here. If you play queen e4, they exchange. So bishop d5, and they threaten to take on f3 and then on e5. So it's a bit risky. White is just slightly better. Yeah, so bishop d5 works, allows you to temporarily win a pawn, but doesn't guarantee a significant advantage. However, if you decide to take, it's even worse. A takes b4. Well, first of all, it stops c3. Second, this pawn potentially becomes the object of the attack. Not sure if they are going to play b5 right away, but maybe they start with bishop d7. That's why white wants to keep the queens on the board. Moreover, white sees that this, and this is a possible plan which would allow white to succeed with an attack. So bishop c4 was played. Knight b6. If the bishop moves, the queens are exchanged. However, here white values his queen a lot, and well, this bishop is not super good because the pawns are located on the light squares. That's why he decides to initiate this exchange and double the pawns. But he creates a threat of bishop a3. What do you think? How black should move here to not blunder bishop a3 and not lose material then? So what's your opinion? Rook d8 loses not only because of bishop g5. Rook d8 loses because of some other attack. Okay. So rook e8. It should be rook e8. Why rook e8? Because if it's rook d8, it's bishop a3, and if queen takes a4, bishop a7 is a discovered attack. So, no, well, the queen goes there, then black loses exchange, so white should be winning. But maybe the queen may retreat somewhere else. Well, c3 square and b6, these two are available. If the queen goes there, I think we have a chance to trap it. Like rook a2 and rook here. I don't want to blunder the rook. That's why I suggest this. So when rook a3 becomes a threat, and if bishop h6, let's say, then this is a double attack. Yeah, so rook a3 becomes a serious threat, and they cannot avoid the queen loss. Rook a2, h6, let's say, rook a3. Oh, there is f5 move. Okay, good point. Ah, bishop a7 first. Then rook a3, because if f5 now, we take. And they cannot take with the queen and let the queen escape. So maybe instead queen b6 makes sense. But if so, it's queen h4, you are taking here, and you're about to play knight g5. So that's why rook e8. Rook d1, taking the control over the file, so bishop d7 is not playable. Queen goes to c5, queen h4, starting the attack. So both bishops are totally restricted. This one is about to take on e5, but at the moment it's impossible. For example, if he does so, what do you think you can do? Bishop e3. Well, yeah, or bishop a3, two options. I like a3 better, but maybe there is no big difference. So the queen moves and this bishop is hanging. So that's why they wanted to get the other bishop at least to the place of action with b6. Bishop a3, queen c6. Now, why queen c6? So bishop a6 forces queen c6. Bishop a3 forces queen c6, and now they cannot take on f3 with their bishop that is likely to stay on b7. So bishop h6, exchanging this and threatening with knight g5, as well as queen f6 and some rook lifts as well. For example, if you continue with this move, it's bishop g7, king g7, queen f6, king moves, and then just a rook lift. Rook d4, queen c5. How would you continue? Well, rook d7 makes a lot of sense, by the way, but maybe you have a better move in mind. Yes, it's knight g5. And how does knight g5 works against queen e7? Because knight g5, you are threatening to take f7. That's why I played queen e7. Yeah, it's knight h7. So you win a pawn and still continue, threaten to continue your attack. So he takes, it's a checkmate. So that's why it's hard to suggest a move. Taking on h6 was a mistake too, because then you can still play rook d4, transfer the rook to h4, and they have no ideas of how to defend. Well, maybe with f5, but en passant, and g7 is also a problem. So bishop h8 is the best move, actually. How should we continue? If we expect bishop b7 to be played? Knight g5 again, but knight g5, bishop b7, they threaten mate at least. But you are not threatening a knight h7. So f3, queen c5, and they take on e5. So bishop g5, f6 looks like a possible plan, I agree. But rook d8 was played. Look at this move. This move allows us to bring this rook to the game. So they cannot take because of a checkmate, and this is a kind of a threat. So they have to play bishop b7. Then we connect two rooks. Here, for example, if they take the pawn on e5, while the knight is pinned, we can win with queen e7 move. So they move back, you take on e8, and bring the other rook, and it's over. Because if they cannot defend the rook on e8, and if they take, it's checkmate. So they played bishop g7 because of that. Rook goes to d7, so we don't want to exchange, but we want to add pressure and threaten f7. Rook f8, take. Well, queen f6 looks good, but it should be combined with a rook lift as well. That's why white starts with a rook lift. However, queen f6 and then rook d4 is completely fine too. Rook a8. So queen f6, king g8, h4, so h5, h6 is a threat. That's why they play h5 themselves. What now? So looks like black has no pieces of activity with their queen, with their bishop, with their rook. All they have to do is to keep their position defended. So, but isn't it a Zugzwang? I think not, because at least they can make these moves, for example, without any danger. Or maybe they can play bishop e8, bishop b7. So it's not a Zugzwang. The problem is that we cannot play knight g5 because of queen g2 mate. What do you think we should do? Okay, so king f1 is suggested by Dan. King h2 is suggested by Mark. Oh, and John actually reveals the whole idea. The king walks to h6. John, are you familiar with this game, or you came up with this idea yourself? Okay, so you recognize. This is actually a famous game. King h2 was played, that's right. So they played rook c8 and allowed our king maneuver to h6. It looks funny, right? It's the middle game. We don't play with the king usually. We try to keep it safe, but here all white pieces are well placed and black is totally paralyzed. What we need is to get our king to the attack, and we can successfully do it if we reach h6. Does it seem dangerous? Only by the first glance. If you look at the position, you'll realize that there is nothing that black can do to threaten your king. Okay, but here we should also discuss this move. Because then what? If we do so, I don't think we win. If we do so, again, I doubt. For example, this move, then rook d8, they play back, and we are not winning. So if bishop c8, then it's actually knight g5 and the rook sacrifice. So take rook f4. They have no defenders of f7, and once we take, the attack becomes decisive. It's not obvious when you see it, when you analyze it, but I mean, when you just see this idea on the first time, but once you analyze it a little deeper, you'll figure out that the attack is quite strong. So queen c5, knight f7. Well, they have to play such a move because if they go with their queen there, it's just queen g6 mate. So knight f7, they have to take it. If they play king h7, I think it's queen g5 and queen comes that way. So rook sacrifices on f7, queen takes. At least you can take on d7, but it was better. Well, if you take the here, yes, it was fine. But it's better to take on g6. Queen e5, g3, don't worry. Defend get rid of the pin, but bring the rook to f7 to checkmate. So rook f7 is the next move. If he does so, it's queen h6. So what he has to do is to bring the queen to g7. And if so, with queen h5, you win the game. First of all, if so, it's rook g4. If queen h7, then just exchange and take the bishop, and this endgame is completely winning. You are several pawns up. So bishop c8 didn't work. Maybe both players calculated it well. Actually, they were rated more than 2600. So that's why it's completely possible. It's even possible for a candidate master to calculate such a combination. So rook c8 was played. And king g3, king comes to f4, and king comes to g5. So after king g5, nobody cares about this rook anymore. So this, and it's over. And there was no possibility to try to attack through the dark squares. For example, how? Queen here, still, well, this time it's knight g5 works because there is no queen g2. But even if you play king a4, it would work. So here, fine. Here, check. Okay, so how can I defend? Well, I have several moves. Let me play this. Okay, maybe first you somehow exchange on f3. Well, king h6 is still a winning move, but let's say you take. Now he does so. Well, f4. So he does so, but still king h6, and the king is safe, and there is no way to defend this move. Every time they try to block with king h7, they block our invasion. We take. They move the king away from the defense of f7, and then it's still a completely winning position with two mating threads. So this is how the game ended after king g5, because there is no defense against king h6. Let's take a look at the original position after e6 move. So look at this pawn and try to figure out how this pawn paralyzes the black piece's activity. The queen in the center becomes the object of the attack. And then, because of the pawn on e5 and because of fewer pieces on the king side, you can initiate the attack on the enemy king. Even your light squared bishop is not so important and may not help you to attack. So, but well, look at this move. So rook d1, restricting bishop d7. They cannot play b6, it loses here. So queen c5 first. And only after you move the queen, then b6 can be played. But it's already a very strong attack. So this. So again, here bishop b7 will threaten our bishop, our knight on f3, sorry. That's why you play this, force the queen to go to c6, and then you threaten, and then f3 is not under attack. You cannot move this knight because of a checkmate, but at least they are not threatening to exchange their bishop for the knight. Instead of opening the position, instead of playing aggressively, here white chose a strategy of a creation of a positional grip in the middle game. So please remember about this feature. Well, I always ask my students to play active moves, to play aggressively, to play for a win. But if you see that playing for a win and making some aggressive actions contains a lot of risk, and instead you can play safely, but step by step improve your position while you don't see any counterplay for your opponent, just improve your position and come up with aggressive plan later when your position won't be so risky and his counterplay would be slower because of your prophylaxis and because of your preparation, or maybe because of you just a little faster with your own attack than you were before, of course. Fine. So, well, it's quite a complicated topic. However, I'm sure we will keep working on it. We have more games devoted to this topic. Maybe even it does make sense to create a course of how to create a positional grip and how to take advantage of it. Let me think. Well, what's your opinion? We are done for today. Well, there will be a group lesson tomorrow. Those of you who are subscribed for our group classes, please do not forget. I know that there is also a holiday in the United States tomorrow, but we decided to not cancel our class because almost everybody told that he would be available for the class. Again, actually soon I will announce another course of group lessons that I'm going to conduct, and as usual it will be very affordable. I didn't choose a topic yet, however I'm going to send an email where I'll ask you to vote, so you will choose the game, or well, subscribers of Tricks of Chess website as well as subscribers of Chesslands will decide which course I should conduct next. Fine. Thank you for coming, and I hope to see everyone next Sunday, same time. I will announce the topic of the webinar in the middle of the week. So, see you next Sunday. Bye-bye.